So life can take you to some pretty surprising places, which is, I suppose, how I found myself recently registering, using my real name and email address, for an account with the National Rifle Association. Now, to be clear, I didn't join the NRA. I registered with their educational arm so that I could take their free hunter safety course, which is more surprising, I suppose, when you consider that I am a vegan. A vegan who has spent much of my life fighting the likes of the NRA in advocating not only for better, safer gun control policies, but for a change in our culture around guns and violence. This hunter safety course is the first of several trainings that I am working my way through as part of my work with Guns to Gardens, which is a ministry that takes Isaiah 2:4 quite seriously. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Applying that to our contemporary context, we beat our guns into garden tools. Now, the Guns to Gardens initiative took off shortly after Sandy Hook. And it's easy to look at Sandy Hook and the inaction that followed and feel defeatist. There's this tweet from 2015 that often gets reshared, and it reads, "In retrospect, Sandy Hook marked the end of the gun control debate in the U.S. Once America decided killing children was bearable, it was over." I don't want to believe that tweet. I don't want to believe that it's true. But it certainly feels that way a lot of the time. I was pretty resigned to that tweet's sentiment when I first encountered Guns to Gardens several years back. It was after some other shooting when I saw a video of a guy, Mike Martin, taking a chop saw and then a hammer and an anvil to an AR-15 to make it into a garden tool. It was unlike any other response to the American gun violence epidemic that I'd seen. It was physical and embodied. It was biblical. It was transformative. It literally transformed a gun before our eyes into a trowel for planting and growing things. But it suggested that we could be transformed too. It breathed new life into the deadlock that we often find ourselves in around guns in America. And it said, "Look, I am doing a new thing. Don't you see it?" So I started following the growth of this new organization that the man in the video had founded. It was called Raw Tools, which is so named for war backwards. We're flipping the script on violence. I threw them some financial support here and there. I bought their book and this necklace made out of a rifle barrel, and my favorite coffee mug that I use at my office, stamped with an image of an anvil and the words "Forging Peace, Disarming Hearts." Tragedy after tragedy, I found myself more and more drawn to this way of enacting swords to plowshares. And then Uvalde happened, and I was absolutely despondent. You know, sometimes these horrible tragedies happen and we find ourselves numb to them, or maybe we're avoidant. Often we do feel empathy, but it's tempered by our own distance from these events that happen somewhere else to someone else. But here, the weight of that particular event came crashing down on me. And in that enormous grief, I remembered the new thing and asked, how do I make my life about it? So through that new thing, and subsequently getting more involved with Guns to Gardens, I discerned my own call to ministry, the interesting places life takes you, right? I've used chop saws and learned how to blacksmith. I dismantled that gun on the cover of your bulletin and others. And as I opened with, I've started taking courses from a group I long perceived as the enemy, the NRA. So the very practical reason is that this work requires safe handling of guns. And ideally, we should have insurance coverage too. Having a certified range safety officer at our dismantling events increases the safety and hopefully persuades insurance to cover them, which in turn empowers more communities to bring this work and spread this witness. And so we need peacemakers who are certified as range safety officers. Guess who certifies range safety officers? So I'll tell you a funny story. We had several meetings to advise the people doing the work of Guns to Gardens across the country about this new requirement to have a certified range safety officer on site. Naturally, we addressed the discomfort that many folks share around working with and through the NRA, actually paying the NRA for some of the more advanced certifications. Well, I decided to chime in with a mini sermon. I waxed poetic about the subversive power at play here. I talked about taking all the harm and pain that we ascribe to that organization and transforming it into life and into peace. It's resurrection work, I said, and all God's people said amen. And then I signed off of that meeting, and I went to start my process of registering for this first hunter safety course. nra.yourlearningportal.com. New users register here. I filled out the form, and then I absolutely could not bring myself to hit submit. For everything I had just said, I had an actual stress response in my body when I sat down to do it. My body was screaming at me not to. I was taken aback by the visceral response over and above this rational, inspired plea I'd just made to everyone to get on board with the new SOP. And so this is what I want to say about Swords to Plowshares, that it is more than just the literal act of dismantling a gun and transforming it, powerful as that aspect is. It is more than just the symbolism as it relates to gun violence in this country. It's a way of being and relating to one another that turns all of our swords, real and metaphorical, into newness and life. And it's hard work, and it's work we have to choose to invest in every single day. And so I guess it was time to interrogate that deep-seated revulsion I'd felt towards anything NRA. Because what does that say about how I viewed people, beloved children of God who are proud members, those with come and take it AR-15 bumper stickers, or who just see the nature of the gun control debate in this country differently than I do? To beat something like a sword or a gun into a plowshare, you have to soften it. That's how it works. It has to become so soft that it can be reformed into something new. Which isn't to say that you melt it down into nothing and pour it into a mold to make it something wholly unrecognizable. You have to work with its existing shape. And it isn't to say that everything becomes so soft and negotiable when you forge, because then it doesn't work. It doesn't work without the anvil and the hammer retaining their steadfastness and firmness. But the workpiece has to soften, because if you try to beat metal that's not malleable enough, it either accomplishes nothing or worse, it breaks. So the challenge I see is softening enough within the existing shape of our cultural and political landscape, be it about guns or any of our many other deep divisions. And the existing shape of guns in America includes the NRA and the people who support it in a big way. Some of us may want to melt that shape down into nothing, but the forging metaphor tells us to soften towards one another so that we can bend. We have to take stock of the existing shape of our community to figure out what new shape we can become together. Now, that exhortation I gave on subversion identified one powerful way to work within the existing shape. Subversion of power is an incredible tool for liberation, and it does take a certain degree of softening to open up to its potential. It's a willingness to take institutional power and turn it upside down to our own ends. But I think there's still yet more softening that needs to happen, and that's really the crux of the matter. We have to understand one another. And this is less about power structures than the people caught up in them. When I finally did muster the resolve to actually register and start the hunter safety course, I started learning more about guns than I ever thought I'd need to know, but also about the culture of them. And I now find I am able to converse more fluently with people of different opinions about it and understand their perspectives better, all by virtue of a simple, free online training course. And so I've started to encourage other gun safety advocates to enroll as well. Now, those in the Guns to Gardens movement who are further along than I am and have progressed to the in-person training for range safety officer certification, they report having fascinating conversations with their NRA instructors about why they are taking the course. And the thing is, those unexpected conversations always end in mutual understanding and respect. And that's the fertile ground from which newness can grow. And when I allow myself to soften enough to really listen with genuine curiosity about why guns are important to the people who love them, I often hear warm stories and memories of dads and granddads taking their kids hunting, or stories of loving nature from some of the staunchest conservationists I have ever met in many hunters. I hear stories about pride and a sense of duty around protecting your family. Often I hear stories about fear in an uncertain world. And so underneath all the inflamed rhetoric that we stoke on the surface are often these stories. And there, I think, is where we find our anvil, in those shared feelings of familial bonds, fear, hope, and love. Because, you know, when you think of smithing, you often think of the hammer doing all of the work. But my blacksmithing instructors always remind me that it's the big, sturdy, heavy anvil that is doing just as much, actually more, than the hammer to reshape the metal by reflecting the energy back up into the workpiece. That anvil is what does the reshaping. And so when we position ourselves, our softened selves, and the action of our hammers against that firm foundation of what we share, we can become something new. We can be part of the new thing God is doing in the world. The prophets knew how powerful blacksmithing was as a metaphor for peace thousands of years ago. It's a way to literally change a weapon into a life-giving garden tool, but it's also a recipe for peace more broadly, one that calls for a shared, firm foundation in our anvil to help reshape who we are when we allow ourselves to be more malleable with one another. May it be so. To the God of peace, who invites us into the new thing God is always doing, be all glory now and forever. Amen.